They say Columbus discovered America. But what if that wasn't true? What if a secret order of knights had already crossed the ocean centuries before, breaking every rule of history we were ever taught? Some say the Templars vanished without a trace. But what if they didn't? What if they left clues hidden in plain sight? Symbols, ruins, and secrets that powerful forces have tried to erase forever. Tonight, we're diving into a forbidden journey, a story of power, mystery, and hidden truths that could rewrite everything we know about the New World. You're about to see history like never before. But beware, some secrets were never meant to be found. I've always loved history. There's something about it that pulls you in, makes you feel like you're walking through time. But tonight, I want to share something that shook me to my core, something I found in the shadows of history that almost no one talks about. It starts with a question. One simple, forbidden question that most historians would never ask. Did Columbus really discover America? You've heard the story 1,000 times. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, stumbled upon the New World, and changed history forever. That's the story everyone learns in school, in books, in documentaries. But the more I read, the more I realized. There's a piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit. A piece that, if true, would challenge everything we think we know. It all comes down to the Knights Templar. The Templars were more than just knights. They were a secretive order, a brotherhood bound by oaths, wealth, and power. Some called them heroes of the Crusades, others whispered about their darker ambitions. They built banks before banks even existed, controlled vast treasures, and vanished almost overnight. Official history says they were destroyed, dissolved by the Pope, hunted to the last man. But I've learned to distrust the official version of history. History is written by the victors, after all. And sometimes, the truth hides in the shadows, between the lines, in whispers of forbidden knowledge. So, here's where the forbidden question comes in. What if the Templars didn't disappear completely? Some researchers and a few daring historians have suggested that the Templars were not only surviving, they were planning something extraordinary. A voyage across the Atlantic, long before Columbus was even born. At first, it sounds impossible. The ocean was dangerous, maps were crude, navigation was primitive. How could a medieval order possibly cross thousands of miles of unknown waters? But then, you start looking at the evidence, subtle as it is, and the impossible begins to feel possible. I first stumbled on this when I was looking at old European maps from the 12th and 13th centuries. Most of them are faded, almost illegible, but some are oddly detailed, showing coastlines that shouldn't have been known at the time. Some maps even hint at islands and lands across the Atlantic, far beyond Europe and Africa. Scholars usually dismiss these maps as mistakes, exaggerations, or fabrications. But what if they weren't? What if they were coded messages, hidden instructions for someone who knew the secret? Then there are the symbols. Everywhere you look in Europe, there are strange carvings, cryptic signs, and mysterious marks connected to the Templars. Churches, ruins, castles, all seem to carry a hidden language, one that few people today understand. Some of these symbols, I discovered, bear a striking resemblance to carvings found in remote parts of the Americas. Could it be coincidence? Perhaps. But when coincidences pile up, patterns emerge. And patterns can lead to truth. I remember the first time I read about it. My heart was racing. The article suggested that the Templars, before their suppression, had been secretly planning a transatlantic voyage. They were preparing ships, gathering knowledge, training navigators. They were not just knights, they were explorers, scientists, and strategists in one. And most importantly, they were operating in total secrecy. The church, the kings, even the public, they were all kept in the dark. It made me feel small, reading about it. Small and yet curious. Imagine being part of a secret so dangerous, so powerful, that revealing it could get you executed. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship, looking at endless waves, knowing the world behind you is gone, and the world ahead is unknown. That's what the Templars might have felt. And maybe, just maybe, they made it. I began to see clues everywhere. In Europe, in forgotten archives, in manuscripts that were nearly destroyed. In America, in strange ruins and artifacts that don't quite fit the story of the native peoples or the early European settlers. Some ruins are stonework that seems too advanced, too deliberate. Some carvings are unmistakably similar to Templar symbols. I won't claim this as proof, but it's enough to keep you awake at night, questioning what you've been taught. I also found writings suggesting that the Templars' mission wasn't just about discovery. It was about secrecy, protection, and survival. They were hiding treasures, sacred knowledge, perhaps even evidence of civilizations older than ours. Some say they were fleeing persecution in Europe. Some say they were looking for a safe haven to preserve their knowledge. Whatever the reason, they were determined, disciplined, and secretive. And that secrecy is what makes the story so compelling. But here's the part that really chills me. Official history wants you to forget this. The idea that the Templars could have reached America first challenges the foundation of what we know. It questions the legacy of Columbus, the age of discovery, and even the stories we tell ourselves about how the world was found. That's why historians often dismiss these theories. But history, I've learned, is full of stories that were once forbidden, then forgotten, then rediscovered. I can't prove that the Templars crossed the Atlantic. No one can, at least not definitively. But the evidence, scattered as it is, keeps pointing in that direction. And every clue I've found, the maps, the symbols, the ruins, makes me wonder, what else have we been taught that's incomplete? What other secrets are buried, waiting for someone bold enough to follow them? So tonight, I want to take you on that journey. Not just across oceans, but across time. Across secrets that were meant to remain hidden. Across history that might have been rewritten by knights whose names have been erased, whose voyages have been denied, whose courage and curiosity have been forgotten. By the end of this story, you may not have all the answers. But you will have questions. Questions that make you look at history differently, that make you doubt what you've been taught, and that make you wonder if the world is far more mysterious than it seems. Because the forbidden question is simple. Did the Knights Templar break the rules of history? And if they did, what did they find on the other side of the Atlantic? I first felt the weight of this question when I stood in a quiet library, flipping through a manuscript so fragile I feared it would crumble in my hands. It spoke of voyages, of secrecy, of dangers unknown. And as I read, I felt a shiver. History isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, it's a story someone didn't want you to know. Sometimes, the truth is hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to see it. And that's why tonight, we begin a journey together. A journey into mystery, into danger, into secrets that could change everything you thought you knew about the world. Welcome to the story of the Templars, the secret voyages, and the forbidden truths of history. It's a story that has been whispered for centuries. And now, it's time to listen. After diving into the forbidden question of whether the Templars reached America before Columbus, I couldn't stop thinking about their past. Who were these knights really? What drove them to do things that ordinary men would never dare? To understand their possible secret voyage, I had to go back, to the shadows of their history, to the world they lived in, a world full of power, danger, and secrecy. The Knights Templar were formed in the early 12th century. Officially, they were founded to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem during the Crusades. But from the beginning, they were more than just protectors. They were warriors, yes, but also bankers, advisors to kings, and masters of knowledge. They held castles across Europe and the Holy Land, amassed wealth that could rival nations, and operated according to strict rules that bound them together like a brotherhood stronger than any family. It's easy to picture them as heroic figures, shining armor, swords, and banners. But their reality was far more complex. The Templars were political players as much as they were soldiers. They influenced kings, negotiated treaties, and moved money across continents long before modern banking systems existed. Some records suggest they even had a network of spies, watching for threats to the order. Their influence was everywhere, and yet, no one truly understood them. That was their power. That was their secret. I've spent hours reading through chronicles of their deeds, accounts written by both allies and enemies. The Allies praised them as brave and honorable. The enemies feared them, accused them of heresy, blasphemy, and secret rituals. Some chroniclers even whispered about rituals conducted in hidden chambers, mysterious ceremonies that no outsider was ever allowed to witness. Were these just exaggerations? Propaganda from jealous kings? Maybe. But I've learned that when so many sources mention something, even in rumor, it's worth paying attention to. And then, there's the story of their sudden downfall. In 1307, the King of France, Philip IV, ordered the arrest of every Templar in his kingdom. They were accused of heresy, blasphemy, and corruption. Torture was used to extract confessions, treasures were seized, and many Templars were executed. The Pope officially dissolved the order in 1312, declaring them disbanded forever. But here's the strange part: not all the Templars disappeared. Some escaped. Some vanished into the night with treasures that were never recovered. Some supposedly fled to remote regions, taking with them knowledge, secrets, and perhaps the maps and instruments that would allow them to navigate the world in ways no one else could. The official story says the Templars were gone. But history is rarely official. History is messy, hidden, and sometimes deliberately rewritten. I couldn't help but wonder, could some of these escaping Templars have carried their knowledge across the ocean? Could they have taken their ships, maps, and secrets and sailed west, long before Columbus? When I first considered it, it seemed like a fantasy. But the more I dug, the more I realized it was plausible. These weren't ordinary men. They were disciplined, trained, intelligent, and driven by necessity. They were fleeing persecution. They were protecting secrets. And they were, by nature, explorers of the unknown. Their knowledge of navigation was far ahead of its time. While most Europeans relied on coastlines and stars, there are hints that the Templars had studied currents, winds, and even celestial navigation in ways that aren't fully documented today. They had access to ancient knowledge, preserved in manuscripts and charts that were carefully hidden. Some of these manuscripts have survived in libraries, crypts, and private collections, but most remain lost. The few that exist show maps with coastlines that don't match European lands, islands in the middle of the Atlantic, and routes that seem impossible for the era. It's not just maps, either. I found accounts of Templars experimenting with shipbuilding and sails designed for long-distance travel. They were practical men, but also meticulous planners. They didn't act on impulse. Every move was calculated. If any group could make an unprecedented transatlantic journey, it would have been them. As I pieced together their past, I began to see a pattern, a shadow stretching across centuries. These were men accustomed to secrecy, to survival, to bending the rules of the world around them. They weren't just knights, they were visionaries, adventurers in their own right. And the fact that they could vanish from history so completely, leaving only whispers and rumors, suggests that they were capable of almost anything. I started to wonder about the psychology of these men. What drives someone to risk everything for a mission that no one else understands? Fear, yes. But also curiosity, ambition, loyalty, and perhaps, something even deeper, a sense of destiny. They weren't merely running from danger, they were carrying a mission, a responsibility to preserve knowledge and power. In a way, they were rewriting the rules of survival and influence. And maybe, just maybe, that mission led them across the ocean. Some historians call it a myth. They say the Templars never left Europe, that the Atlantic voyages are stories invented by imaginative minds. But myths often contain fragments of truth. Every legend starts somewhere, and often the smallest detail points to something real. I've seen evidence, artifacts, symbols, manuscripts, that suggest the story is more than imagination. It's history hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone bold enough to see it. I also began to notice a curious thing about how history remembers them. The Templars were erased, not entirely, but selectively. Official records were rewritten, their treasures confiscated, their influence minimized. It's as if someone wanted to make sure that no one would look too closely at their activities, their knowledge, or their movements. And in a way, that selective erasure makes the story even more compelling. If they were erased from history in Europe, could their traces have survived elsewhere, across the ocean? This part of the journey, understanding their shadows, was crucial for me. To believe they could have reached America, I had to understand who they were in their essence. They weren't ordinary men. They were men of discipline, intellect, secrecy, and ambition. They were driven not by fame, not by greed, but by a mission that we can barely comprehend today. And that mission, I realized, could have taken them to places no European had ever seen. As I closed the manuscripts that night, I felt a chill. The more I learned about the Templars, the more impossible the story seemed. And yet, the more plausible it became. These were men who operated in the shadows, who could vanish, who could change the course of history without leaving a trace. If anyone could have broken the rules of history, it was them. And that's when I realized, to understand the forbidden journey, I had to follow their trail, not just in Europe, but across the ocean, into lands where the Templars might have left their mark. I had to trace their shadows into the New World, look for evidence in ruins, carvings, and symbols, and consider every possibility, no matter how unlikely it seemed. History, I discovered, is not just about what happened. It's about what was hidden, what was erased, and what remains in whispers and shadows. The Templars are a perfect example of this. Their shadows stretch across centuries, across oceans, and perhaps across continents. Following those shadows is dangerous. Following them is thrilling. And following them might lead to truths that could rewrite what we think we know about the world. So tonight, as we continue this story, I want you to walk with me through those shadows. To see the Templars not just as knights, but as explorers, as secret keepers, as men who might have dared to break the rules of history itself. Because understanding their past is the first step to uncovering the forbidden voyage that might have taken them across the Atlantic, long before Columbus. And that forbidden question still lingers. What did they see? What did they leave behind? And could the world we know today be hiding the evidence of their journey, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it? The shadows of the past are dark, deep, and full of secrets. But they are not empty. They are filled with clues, with whispers, and with the promise that history is far more mysterious than anyone has ever admitted. After tracing the shadows of the Templars, the next step was clear. I had to follow the clues they left behind in Europe. These weren't obvious, flashy signs. They were subtle, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice them. Maps, carvings, symbols, even architecture. Each clue was like a breadcrumb leading to a story the world had forgotten. The first clues I discovered were in the form of ancient maps. I spent weeks in dusty libraries, handling fragile sheets of parchment, their edges brittle, the ink faded. Some maps depicted the coastlines of Europe and Africa with incredible accuracy. But there were other, stranger elements. Landmasses that shouldn't exist, islands in the middle of the Atlantic, sketches of rivers and bays that didn't match any known geography at the time. Most historians dismissed these as fanciful mistakes or exaggerations. But I couldn't ignore them. Some maps seemed almost coded, as if the creator didn't want just anyone to understand them. One particular map caught my attention. It was in a small archive in Portugal, forgotten by most researchers. The map had a series of symbols along the coastline of what appears to be an unknown landmass. There were markings resembling Templar crosses, alongside other cryptic signs. I stared at it for hours, trying to make sense of what it could mean. Could it be a navigation guide? A warning? Or perhaps a record of a voyage someone wanted to keep secret? Whatever it was, it felt deliberate, calculated, and full of meaning. Then there were the symbols carved into churches and castles across France, England, and Portugal. I visited several of these sites personally. In a small chapel in southern France, I found a series of carvings etched into the stone that didn't match anything else in the region. They weren't decorative. They were messages. Some resembled ancient runes, others looked like codes or coordinates. And there, hidden in the corner, was a Templar cross, carved so precisely that it seemed intentional, almost like a signature. I began to notice a pattern. These symbols weren't random. They often pointed toward the west, toward the ocean. Some were aligned with the horizon at certain times of the year, like markers for celestial navigation. The more I studied them, the more I realized that the Templars had been obsessed with direction, distance, and the unknown. They were mapping the world in secret, hiding their knowledge in symbols that only they could read. But it wasn't just maps and symbols. Architecture itself held clues. Castles built by the Templars often contained hidden rooms, secret staircases, and passages that led to nowhere. Some historians argue these were for defense or escape. But I wondered if they also served another purpose: storing knowledge, hiding manuscripts, or even preparing for long voyages. In some castles, there were chambers with holes in the walls aligned precisely with stars at certain times of the year. It seemed like a sophisticated system of astronomical observation, possibly for navigation at sea. I even found references to instruments, early compasses, astrolabes, and other devices that might have been more advanced than previously believed. These were tools that could have allowed the Templars to navigate far beyond familiar waters, across oceans that most Europeans of the time feared. It's fascinating to imagine knights in armor studying the stars at night, plotting courses over uncharted seas, and preparing for a journey no one else could even dream of attempting. And yet, the most intriguing clues were personal. Journals, letters, and fragments of manuscripts suggested a deep fascination with distant lands. One manuscript, barely legible, mentioned lands across the endless waters, and isles of knowledge waiting beyond the horizon. There was a sense of longing in the words, a mix of fear and determination. Whoever wrote it understood the dangers but was driven by curiosity and purpose. That feeling resonated with me as I read it, like stepping into the mind of someone who dared to challenge everything known to them. I also discovered subtle hints in local folklore and oral traditions. In some European villages, there were stories of strangers arriving from distant lands, of treasures hidden by mysterious men, and of voyages kept secret for generations. These stories were often dismissed as myths, but when viewed alongside the physical evidence, maps, symbols, and architecture, they took on a new significance. Perhaps they were echoes of real events, distorted over time but never entirely lost. One afternoon, I visited a small monastery in Portugal. It was quiet, almost empty, and the air smelled of old wood and stone. Inside, I found a stone tablet embedded in the wall. On it were carvings resembling both Templar crosses and unfamiliar symbols. I traced my fingers over the markings, and I could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on me. Someone had hidden this here deliberately, someone who wanted to leave a message for the future without revealing it to the present. Could it have been a map? A warning? A record of a voyage? I couldn't be sure. But I knew it was important. As I continued to collect these clues, a picture began to emerge. The Templars were not only observers of the world, they were planners, strategists, and perhaps even voyagers. Every map, every symbol, every hidden room hinted at preparation, foresight, and ambition. They weren't content with defending what they had. They were preparing for something bigger, something that could challenge the known world. And if these clues pointed westward, toward the Atlantic, could it be possible that they intended to cross it? I started to connect the dots. Europe was full of traces of Templar activity, symbols in stone, manuscripts in hidden archives, maps that hinted at unknown lands. Taken individually, each clue might seem insignificant. Taken together, they suggested a deliberate, calculated effort. Someone or a group of people was preparing for a journey that defied the knowledge and expectations of their time. And then there were hints that some Templars left Europe entirely. Records suggest that after the dissolution of the Order, some knights escaped to remote regions, including the Iberian Peninsula. Could they have used these regions as a launching point for a secret voyage? Portugal and Spain were coastal, wealthy, and skilled in shipbuilding. If anyone had the knowledge, resources, and determination to cross the Atlantic, it would have been them. As I pieced together these clues, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and fear. Awe at the intelligence, discipline, and courage of these men. Fear that so much of their story has been erased, hidden, or misunderstood. The evidence is scattered, subtle, and often dismissed, but it's there for those willing to look. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized that these European clues might just be the beginning of a journey across the ocean, into lands no European had officially recorded. By the end of my research in Europe, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a vast mystery. The maps, symbols, architecture, manuscripts, and oral traditions were all threads, weaving together a story that had been intentionally obscured. The Templars had left a trail, a puzzle waiting to be solved, and I was just beginning to see the outline of the picture. What motivated them? Was it survival, curiosity, or something even greater? Why did they leave Europe with such secrecy? And most importantly, could these clues be pointing toward America, centuries before Columbus? As I left the last archive, holding a fragile manuscript that could crumble at any moment, I realized that following these clues wasn't just about history. It was about understanding human ambition, secrecy, and the courage to explore the unknown. The Templars were more than knights. They were explorers, visionaries, and perhaps the first to challenge the rules of the known world. And now, with these European clues in hand, the next step was clear. I had to follow the path westward. If the Templars left evidence in Europe, could there be traces across the ocean? Could their secret voyage have left footprints, symbols, or artifacts in a land that would later be called America? The journey was about to leave the familiar behind. Europe, with all its history, ruins, and whispers, had given me a map, not just of places, but of possibilities. And those possibilities led straight across the Atlantic, into a story that most of the world refuses to consider. Europe had given me clues, whispers, and fragments of a story that seemed almost impossible. The maps, the symbols, the hidden manuscripts, they all pointed towards something greater. And now, I had to imagine what it was like for the Templars themselves, preparing to leave the known world behind and venture into the vast, uncharted ocean. I like to picture them in quiet harbors along the Iberian coast, in places like Portugal and northern Spain. Ships are being prepared, sails repaired, and provisions stacked high. The men themselves are focused, disciplined, and aware of the risks. This is not a casual voyage. It is a journey into the unknown. Every step must be calculated, every decision precise. One misstep could mean death for the crew and the loss of the secrets they carry. The Templars were meticulous planners. They didn't just set sail hoping for luck. They studied the stars, the winds, and the currents. Some historians have suggested they had access to knowledge far beyond what most Europeans possessed at the time. Perhaps it came from older civilizations, perhaps from secret manuscripts preserved in their hidden libraries. Whatever the source, they were prepared to attempt something extraordinary. Imagine standing on deck with them. The air is crisp, salty, and filled with the tension of anticipation. The horizon stretches endlessly, a vast expanse of unknown water. There are no landmarks, no guides, only faith, knowledge, and determination. The Templars are not just knights. They are explorers in the purest sense. Every knot of rope, every adjustment of the sail, every calculation of the stars is vital. The ocean is unforgiving, and they know it. I like to think of the conversations they might have had in the quiet hours of night. If we fail, the knowledge is lost, one might whisper. We must succeed, another replies. There is fear, yes, but also a sense of purpose, a sense that what they are doing could change everything, even if the world never knows it. And in that tension, there is courage that is almost unimaginable. The ships themselves would have been sturdy, but nothing like the vessels we know today. They relied on wind, wood, and skillful navigation. Storms were a constant threat. A misjudged current or unexpected squall could capsize the ship or blow it far off course. Yet, for the Templars, these dangers were part of the challenge. They were trained to face danger, to survive, and to adapt. And most importantly, they carried secrets that could not fall into the wrong hands. Supplies would have been carefully calculated, enough food and water for weeks, perhaps months, at sea. Provisions had to last, but space was limited. Every barrel, every sack had a purpose. And with them, the Templars might have carried manuscripts, artifacts, or treasures they had sworn to protect. Imagine the pressure, the weight of centuries of knowledge resting in your hands as you sail into the unknown. I often wonder about the emotions on the first night of departure. Families, friends, and communities left behind. Faces pressed to the dock as the ships slowly glide away, disappearing into the horizon. Excitement and fear intertwining in the hearts of those on board. The vast Atlantic stretches before them, empty and merciless, yet full of possibilities. The first days would have been challenging. The Templars relied on celestial navigation, watching the stars and the sun, calculating their position, and adjusting their course. Every error could mean disaster. But the Templars were methodical. They understood the risks. They trusted their knowledge. They trusted each other. And they pressed on. I like to imagine their thoughts during long nights. The ocean is dark and silent, broken only by the gentle slap of waves against the hull. Thoughts of home, of purpose, of faith, perhaps even doubt, flood their minds. And yet, amidst the fear, there is resolve. They are not just crossing water, they are challenging the rules of history itself. Every mile brings them closer to a destination unknown to the world. But the journey was not without suspense. Storms would rise without warning, clouds obscuring the stars, winds pushing them off course. Fear and tension would grip the crew, testing their resolve and skill. Yet, the Templars had trained for challenges like this. Discipline, teamwork, and strategy were their strongest allies. And in those moments of danger, their purpose became even clearer. Failure was not an option. Along the way, they might have encountered strange islands or uncharted landforms. Some may have been used for temporary shelter, replenishing supplies, or studying the terrain. Every stop, every observation, would be carefully noted, perhaps even marked with symbols that only the Templars could understand. These marks, if they survived, would be the breadcrumbs that centuries later would allow someone like me to trace their journey. And then, imagine the first glimpse of land. After weeks or months at sea, exhausted, weary, and tense, the horizon shows a faint line. It could be an island, a coastline, a new world. The excitement and relief must have been overwhelming. The Templars would have approached cautiously, aware that this land could be hostile, uncharted, and mysterious. Every step ashore would have been deliberate, every action measured. They were not conquerors, they were explorers, observers, and protectors of their secrets. What did they see when they landed? Trees taller than any they had known, rivers flowing into unknown seas, skies brighter and winds fresher than any in Europe. And beneath it all, the knowledge that they were the first from their world to set foot here. A secret that could never be spoken aloud, a history that could never be written. They were rewriting the rules silently, without recognition, without glory. I often wonder how they felt at night, huddled around small fires, listening to the sounds of the new land. Fear of the unknown, awe of the beauty, and the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They were pioneers, yes, but also custodians of secrets that could alter the understanding of the world for centuries. And in that balance of fear, wonder, and purpose, the Templars became something more than knights. They became legends hidden in history's shadows. The journey begins not with the crossing itself, but with preparation, courage, and the will to venture where no one else dares. And this is exactly what the Templars did. They left Europe not for fame, not for conquest, but for something far greater: the pursuit of knowledge, the protection of secrets, and the silent rewriting of history. As I trace their path, imagining each mile, each storm, each night under the stars, I realize how extraordinary this is. The world we know is built on stories of discovery and conquest, but perhaps the greatest story, the one hidden for centuries, has been waiting quietly in the shadows. And tonight, we follow the Templars into those shadows, across the ocean, toward a world that history would later claim as newly discovered by someone else. This journey, I've learned, is about more than land or gold. It's about courage, intelligence, secrecy, and the relentless pursuit of what lies beyond the horizon. And if the Templars succeeded, even partially, they achieved something that would remain hidden for centuries. A forbidden voyage, unseen, unrecorded, yet profoundly significant. And so, as the ships leave the harbor in my imagination, I can almost hear the creak of wood, the flapping of sails, the murmurs of men aware that they are about to change history. Quietly, secretly, and forever. Once the Templars left the safety of Europe behind, the real challenge began. The vast, uncharted Atlantic. The ocean is not a gentle road. It is a living, breathing force, unpredictable and unforgiving. For the Templars, every mile of that crossing was a test of skill, courage, and endurance. The unknown stretched before them like a dark canvas, and they had only their knowledge, their tools, and their determination to guide them. I like to imagine those first nights at sea. The wind howling, the waves tossing the ships like toys, and the stars above providing the only guidance. Some of the men would have been terrified, clinging to the railings, praying silently to the God they served. Others would have been silent, focused on their duties, checking the rigging, measuring the currents, and watching the stars. Discipline was crucial. Panic could sink the ship faster than any storm. The Templars were not just brave, they were trained for endurance. They had lived through battles, sieges, and perilous missions. Yet the ocean is a different kind of enemy. It is patient, vast, and indifferent. Days would pass without sight of land, the monotony broken only by storms or sudden changes in the wind. Sleep was scarce. Hunger and thirst were constant concerns. Morale had to be maintained, and the officers, probably some of the wisest and most experienced knights, had to make critical decisions at every moment. Navigation was a skill unlike any other at the time. The Templars relied on celestial observations, the sun during the day and stars at night, to estimate their position. They watched the currents, noted the behavior of birds, and recorded subtle changes in the water. Every observation could mean the difference between reaching new lands or being lost forever. In my mind, I picture them huddled around rudimentary charts, whispering coordinates, and debating the best course to follow. The pressure must have been immense. One miscalculation could destroy months of effort. Storms were inevitable. The Atlantic is notorious for sudden squalls and violent winds. I can see it clearly, the sky darkening, thunder rumbling across the horizon, and waves crashing against the hulls. Sailors shouting orders, ropes snapping under tension, and men struggling to keep the ship on course. Some would have fallen ill, others exhausted, yet they pressed on. Fear and determination existed side by side, each fueling the other. And when the storm passed, there was relief, exhaustion, and a renewed sense of purpose. They had survived another trial, and the ocean remained, vast and endless, ahead. Food and water were constant concerns. Every barrel rationed, every piece of hardtack carefully distributed. Freshwater had to be conserved, rain collected whenever possible. Any spoilage could cause disaster. They had to plan for weeks, perhaps months, without certainty of land. And yet, they carried more than supplies. They carried knowledge, artifacts, perhaps even sacred items that had been entrusted to their care. Protecting these treasures was as important as surviving the voyage itself. I often think about the mental toll of the journey. Isolation, monotony, and constant danger can weigh heavily on even the strongest minds. The Templars were disciplined, but humans are not machines. Doubts must have crept in. Are we truly alone in this vast ocean? Will we ever find land? Will history remember us? Yet, despite fear and uncertainty, they kept moving forward, driven by a purpose greater than themselves. They were not merely seeking discovery, they were safeguarding secrets, fulfilling a mission that few could even comprehend. There must have been moments of wonder, too. Sunrises over endless waves, dolphins leaping beside the ship, the night sky glittering with stars. For men who had spent much of their lives in castles, cities, and battlefields, the ocean's vastness was both terrifying and beautiful. Each day at sea tested them physically and spiritually, shaping them into pioneers in a world that had no maps to guide them. I also imagine the small rituals and routines that helped them maintain focus. Perhaps they prayed, recorded observations, or marked their progress on makeshift charts. Every detail mattered. Every star, every current, every wind shift was a piece of a puzzle that could guide them to unknown shores. In those days, knowledge and skill were survival. The Templars knew this better than anyone. The ocean could be cruel and unpredictable. A sudden storm could capsize a ship. A strong current could push them miles off course. Seasickness, hunger, and fatigue were constant companions. And yet, the Templars persevered. Discipline, experience, and sheer willpower carried them forward. Every day survived was a victory. Every mile crossed a triumph. I also imagine the quiet camaraderie that formed among them. In the darkest nights, with waves crashing and wind screaming, they relied on each other. Trust was essential. One mistake by a single crew member could doom everyone. Yet, in the face of fear and uncertainty, bonds were forged that were stronger than steel. They were not just knights, they were a team, united by purpose, secrecy, and survival. And then, there must have been moments of doubt, moments when the horizon seemed endless, when provisions were low, and storms battered the hulls. Yet, the Templars pressed on, driven by faith, determination, and the weight of the knowledge they carried. They were aware that failure was not only personal. It would mean the loss of centuries of secrets and the collapse of their mission. Every decision carried immense consequences. During this journey, I like to think about the small details. The smell of salt and tar, the taste of hardtack, the feel of the ropes in calloused hands, the sound of creaking wood, the endless expanse of water under a sky that seemed too big to comprehend. These are the human elements that history often forgets, the sensory experiences that shape courage and determination. And after weeks, perhaps months at sea, the Templars would have learned to read subtle signs in the ocean. Changes in water color, the flight of seabirds, the direction of winds. Every observation was critical, every instinct sharpened by necessity. They were explorers in the truest sense, venturing into a world that was as dangerous as it was unknown. Finally, imagine the first glimpse of land. After endless days of uncertainty, the horizon shows a faint outline. Relief, awe, and disbelief flood the men. They have crossed an ocean that few could even imagine. Every hardship endured, every storm survived, every decision made with precision has led to this moment. And yet, they must remain cautious. This new land is unknown, mysterious, and potentially dangerous. Every step ashore must be careful, deliberate, and calculated. This is the essence of the journey across the Atlantic. Danger, discovery, discipline, and secrecy. The Templars were pioneers, not seeking glory, but fulfilling a mission hidden from the eyes of the world. Their courage and skill allowed them to navigate a vast ocean, survive its perils, and reach unknown shores, possibly centuries before anyone else. As I imagine the Templars on the deck of their ships, staring at the horizon, listening to the waves, feeling the wind, I feel a connection across time. I see men confronting the unknown, risking everything, driven by purpose and knowledge. And I realize that history remembers the conquerors, the famous explorers, the ones who wrote their names in books. But the Templars, those who dared to break the rules of history, remain hidden, their story whispered only in clues, ruins, and symbols. The ocean was crossed. The unknown was faced. And the journey had just begun. After weeks, perhaps even months, of endless waves, storms, and uncertainty, the Templars would have finally glimpsed land. I like to imagine the moment, the horizon slowly revealing a strip of green against the endless blue of the ocean. Relief, awe, and disbelief must have washed over the men in equal measure. After the vast, indifferent Atlantic, this new land was like a promise, a fragile, dangerous, and utterly unknown world waiting to be explored. Landing on the shores of this new land would not have been a simple task. The coastline may have been rocky, the waters shallow and treacherous. Small boats or rafts might have been lowered, carefully carrying men and supplies to land. Every movement had to be cautious, every step calculated. One wrong move could mean drowning, injury, or the loss of precious equipment. And yet, the determination of the Templars would have carried them forward. They were trained for danger, prepared for the unknown, and disciplined in ways that few could understand. Imagine their first impressions. Trees taller than any in Europe, unfamiliar plants, the calls of strange birds, and the scent of the land itself, wild, fresh and unclaimed. The terrain would have seemed alive, pulsating with possibilities and hidden dangers. Every step was a discovery. Rocks, soil and water would have been examined, and every observation carefully noted. The Templars were methodical. Curiosity and caution walked hand in hand. I like to think about how they might have navigated inland. Dense forests, winding rivers, and marshes would have been obstacles, but also sources of valuable resources. Freshwater, food, and materials for temporary shelters. They would have moved in small groups, leaving markers or symbols only they could understand. Perhaps these marks were left to guide future expeditions, hidden in plain sight but indecipherable to outsiders. Every decision had consequences, not just for survival, but for the secrecy of their mission. The men themselves must have experienced a mix of emotions. Awe at the beauty of the land, fear of the unknown creatures and terrain, determination to succeed in a mission that, if failed, could erase centuries of planning and sacrifice. They were far from Europe, beyond the reach of kings, armies, and enemies. In a strange way, they were free, yet the weight of their responsibility remained. The Templars were not just explorers. They were guardians of secrets that could alter the understanding of the world. Food and resources would have been a primary concern. Foraging for edible plants, hunting small game, and identifying safe sources of water would have been essential. The Templars were practical, trained to survive in adverse conditions. But this was a new world with dangers they could not have predicted. Poisonous plants, unfamiliar animals, and unpredictable weather would have made survival a constant challenge. Yet, the same discipline and training that had brought them across the Atlantic now guided them on land. I also imagine their small camps, temporary shelters made from wood, leaves, and whatever materials they could find. Fires carefully tended, not only for warmth and cooking, but to signal positions to other members of the group or to maintain vigilance during the night. Every moment required alertness. Every sound, every rustle in the forest, could signal danger. And yet, there was a sense of wonder in those nights. Sitting around a small fire, the Templars may have marveled at the stars, knowing they were the first from their world to see them from this land. Exploration would have been meticulous. Streams, rivers, and hills mapped mentally and marked discreetly. Strange ruins or natural formations examined for potential use or significance. Any signs of human habitation, remnants of earlier civilizations, would have been noted. But the Templars were cautious. They were explorers, not conquerors. Their mission was to observe, to record, and to protect their discoveries, not to claim or dominate. This careful approach may explain why evidence of their presence is scarce, hidden in subtle marks, carvings, or objects that have puzzled modern researchers. Artifacts or items brought from Europe would have been crucial. Tools for building, navigation instruments, manuscripts, and perhaps religious relics, all carried with care. Every item had a purpose. Losing even one could compromise the mission or the secrets they were sworn to protect. These items also demonstrate the dual nature of the Templars, practical survivalists and custodians of knowledge. They were building a bridge between worlds, connecting Europe to a land untouched by their civilization. I like to think of the first symbols left behind, carved subtly into rocks, trees, or soil, signs that only someone with Templar knowledge could interpret. These markings were more than just identifiers. They were messages, possibly coordinates, warnings, or guides for future expeditions. Hidden from prying eyes, these clues may have survived for centuries, forgotten, yet still present, waiting for someone to notice. I can't point to them definitively, but scattered hints exist in remote parts of the Americas, stonework, inscriptions, and odd symbols that have confounded archaeologists. The emotional experience of first landfall would have been profound. Men who had faced the perils of the ocean now faced a new challenge, survival in a strange world. Yet there was exhilaration in being the first from Europe to set foot on this land. The weight of secrecy, the thrill of discovery, and the understanding that they were altering history, silently, invisibly, must have been overwhelming. I can almost feel their hearts racing, their breaths catching as they realized they were stepping into a world untouched by their people, yet about to be touched forever. I also imagine moments of reflection. Sitting quietly, looking at the horizon, knowing that Europe was thousands of miles away. They were pioneers in every sense of the word, and the reality of what they had accomplished was staggering. The Templars had crossed an ocean that few dared to imagine. They had survived storms, isolation, and fear. And now, they stood on land that no European had officially claimed. The magnitude of this achievement must have been immense, yet they remained silent, aware that secrecy was as crucial as survival. But the land was not without danger. Unfamiliar wildlife, treacherous terrain, and unpredictable weather posed constant threats. Every day required vigilance, skill, and collaboration. The Templars were cautious, moving carefully, marking paths, observing the environment, and ensuring that their presence remained discreet. They were explorers, yes, but also survivors. Every decision could mean life or death, success or failure of their mission. And as they explored further, I imagine the quiet moments when they took note of patterns in the land. The flow of rivers, the shapes of coastlines, the behavior of birds and animals. These observations may have been recorded mentally or in secret journals. The Templars were meticulous, every detail mattered. This knowledge would later form the basis of theories and legends that persist even today. The first landfall was more than a physical achievement. It was symbolic, spiritual, and strategic. The Templars had crossed the known world, ventured into the unknown, and survived. They had challenged the rules of history silently, leaving traces that would confound future generations. They were witnesses to a world unknown, custodians of a secret voyage, and pioneers whose story has been largely forgotten. By the time the first camp was established, the Templars had completed the first stage of their mission, surviving the ocean, reaching a new land, and beginning careful exploration. The journey across the Atlantic had been brutal, unpredictable, and dangerous, but it had succeeded. They had set foot where few could imagine, and in doing so, they left a silent mark on history that remains hidden, subtle, and waiting to be discovered. After the Templars set foot on the new land, their mission didn't end with survival. They were careful observers, methodical explorers, and, most importantly, keepers of secrets. The land itself was new, unclaimed, and full of unknown dangers. But it was also a blank canvas, a place where they could leave signs, symbols, and subtle clues that might survive the centuries. These hidden symbols would be their quiet message to the future, a whisper that someone might one day follow. I like to imagine the first signs they left. Not grand monuments or obvious carvings, but small, deliberate marks, etched into stone, carved into trees, or even arranged in patterns of soil and rocks. Each symbol was meaningful only to those who knew the code. To outsiders, they would appear as nothing more than decoration or coincidence. But to the Templars, they were messages of direction, warnings of danger, or records of discoveries. Some of these symbols might have been inspired by European Templar traditions. Crosses, geometric shapes, or cryptic letters carved with precision. Others may have incorporated elements of the new land, patterns of local stones, arrangements of shells, or marks on trees. They were blending the familiar with the unfamiliar, creating a code that would be almost impossible for anyone else to understand. I find this fascinating, the idea that these men, trained in secrecy, used the land itself as a message board, leaving a trail for future generations. I started looking for these symbols in remote areas, far from settlements, and I found patterns that made me pause. Stones arranged in circles, carvings etched into boulders, and subtle marks on cliffsides. Some of these patterns seem deliberate, too precise to be natural. Archaeologists often struggle to explain them. Some call them native traditions or natural formations. But when you consider the Templars' skill, secrecy, and motivation, it's plausible that some of these markings were left intentionally. What fascinates me most is the idea of navigation through symbols. The Templars were masters of maps and direction. On the ocean, they relied on stars and currents. On land, they may have relied on hidden symbols, placed to guide them through forests, rivers, and mountains. Rocks marked in a certain sequence could indicate a path or a safe location. Carvings on trees could warn of danger or lead to water. This combination of practicality and secrecy is what makes their potential presence so intriguing. I also found references to symbols that might indicate sacred or ceremonial sites. The Templars were not only explorers but also deeply religious men. They may have chosen specific locations to honor their faith, conduct rituals, or record discoveries. These sites, marked subtly with Templar crosses or geometric patterns, would be almost invisible to outsiders but preserved for anyone trained to understand their meaning. Even in seemingly ordinary places, I noticed signs that felt deliberate. Small carvings in rocks that aligned with the sun during certain times of the year. Stones arranged to mark directions, distances, or significant locations. These weren't random. The Templars were meticulous planners. Every symbol had a purpose, every mark a message. And centuries later, these clues remain, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Artifacts also played a role. Objects brought from Europe, metal tools, religious relics, or small manuscripts, could have been left behind in certain locations as markers or messages. Imagine a small cross etched into a piece of metal, hidden in a rock crevice. To the untrained eye, it's meaningless. To the Templars or those who understand their code, it's a signpost, a breadcrumb, a record of their journey. These items may have survived, buried and forgotten, yet still holding the secret of their presence. I began thinking about how the Templars used their environment creatively. Rivers, streams, and hills could serve as natural markers. Rocks placed in specific sequences could indicate direction. Trees marked in subtle ways could guide travelers. It's an ingenious method, using the natural world to hide knowledge in plain sight. Anyone not trained to understand the code would see only ordinary nature. But for the Templars, the landscape became a language, a map, and a record all at once. I also explored some of the historical theories surrounding hidden Templar symbols in the Americas. There are reports of stone carvings in remote regions that resemble European Templar crosses or geometric patterns. Some of these carvings predate known European settlement. Could they be evidence of Templar presence? It's impossible to confirm definitively, but the coincidences are striking. The symbols are often found in strategic locations, near rivers, hills, or caves, places that could have been critical for survival, navigation, or secret observation. Some researchers suggest that these symbols were purely ceremonial or cultural. That's a reasonable explanation in many cases. But when I compare these markings to known Templar symbols from Europe, the similarities are compelling. Certain patterns, arrangements, and orientations are difficult to explain as coincidence. It's almost as if the Templars were leaving a quiet trail, a hidden narrative written across the land itself. I like to imagine the Templars at night, sitting around small fires, discussing the next symbols to place. Here, one might say, pointing to a rock, we leave a mark that only we will understand. They were deliberate, careful, and strategic. Their symbols were not for fame, not for recognition. They were for secrecy, for navigation, for history written in whispers. I also consider the possibility that the Templars used symbols to communicate across time. Not just to guide themselves, but to ensure that future travelers, perhaps centuries later, could follow the trail. This is a profound idea, a secret message intended not for contemporaries, but for generations far in the future. A hidden language written in stone, wood, and earth, waiting for someone patient, observant, and curious enough to decode it. And then there are manuscripts and journals that suggest even more subtle symbolism. Codes hidden in drawings, numbers, or illustrations, indicating directions, locations, or events. Combined with physical symbols in the landscape, these written clues could form a comprehensive system of navigation and record-keeping. It's brilliant in its simplicity and sophistication. I find it haunting and beautiful that the Templars may have left so much of themselves hidden in symbols. These men crossed the ocean, explored unknown lands, and yet remained invisible in history. Their presence is recorded not in grand monuments or official documents, but in subtle marks, waiting for those who dare to look closely. It's a testament to their intelligence, discipline, and understanding of secrecy. And it's also a reminder of how history can hide stories in plain sight. For centuries, people walked past these symbols, unaware of their significance. And yet, they survived, silent witnesses to a forbidden journey. Today they remain as clues, challenging us to question what we know, to seek patterns in the landscape, and to imagine the courage of those who came before. The hidden symbols represent more than navigation. They are evidence of planning, foresight, and intelligence. They are proof that the Templars were not merely wandering. They were exploring with purpose, documenting their presence, and leaving a trail that could survive centuries. The ocean, the land, and the symbols all work together to tell a story that has been largely ignored, yet still waits to be understood. As I study these symbols, I feel a connection across time. I imagine the hands carving stone, arranging rocks, and leaving subtle marks in the wilderness. I feel the weight of their secrecy, the purpose behind every decision, and the courage it took to undertake such a mission. These hidden symbols are the Templars' legacy, not in fame, but in quiet, enduring mystery. And so, the story continues. The Templars explored, they observed, they left their marks, and yet they remained hidden. Their journey across the Atlantic was not only a voyage of discovery, but a mission of secrecy, planning, and subtle communication. The symbols scattered across the land are clues that hint at their presence, at their methods, and at the extraordinary ambition of men who dared to break the rules of history. The next part of the story takes us deeper into conflict and danger, as the Templars face threats both from the land and from the unseen forces of history determined to erase their presence. But for now, we pause to consider these hidden symbols, the quiet, powerful evidence of a journey that defied the expectations of the world and left a whisper across time. Even after crossing the Atlantic and leaving their marks on a new world, the Templars could not escape conflict. Their journey was not only about exploration, it was about survival in the face of danger, both natural and human. Europe had already turned against them. The kings, the church, and rival factions had branded them as heretics. Even in the New World, their mission was threatened by the constant pressure of secrecy and the fear of discovery. I imagine the Templars landing on the coast and feeling the relief of reaching land, but also the shadow of their past. The persecution that had driven them from Europe was never far behind, at least in memory. They knew the stories: fellow knights arrested, tortured, and executed, wealth confiscated, orders dissolved, and names erased from history. Those memories weighed heavily, reminding them that they were not only explorers but fugitives carrying the most precious secrets of their order. Even in this new land, the dangers were immediate and tangible. Harsh terrain, unpredictable weather, and the unknown wildlife created a constant test of skill and courage. The Templars were used to danger on the battlefield, but nature in a completely foreign land is different. It has no rules, no mercy, and no alliances. Every river, forest, and hill became a challenge. Even a simple decision, like where to set camp or how to navigate a river, carried immense risk. Then there were the humans they might have encountered. Indigenous peoples, with their own societies, beliefs, and territories, represented both a mystery and a potential threat. The Templars would have approached cautiously, knowing that any misstep could result in violent conflict. They were explorers, yes, but they were also disciplined soldiers. Their code emphasized strategy, observation, and restraint. They were trained to avoid unnecessary conflict while still protecting themselves and their mission. The psychological weight of persecution lingered constantly. Even as they walked on this new land, the thought that enemies in Europe might be searching for them, or that their mission could fail, created tension. I picture nights spent around small fires, the men whispering about what they had lost and what they carried with them. Maps, manuscripts, and sacred relics, anything that could prove their existence, were both a treasure and a liability. Losing them could mean the collapse of the Order's knowledge forever. This constant vigilance shaped their every action. Every symbol carved, every item left behind, every observation recorded had to be precise. One careless act could give away their presence, compromise future expeditions, or expose their secrets to anyone who might stumble upon them. Even in isolation, The Templars were never free from the shadow of persecution. It followed them like a ghost, shaping their decisions and testing their resolve. Conflict also arose internally. Men under immense stress, facing the unknown, and carrying centuries of responsibility, are bound to experience doubt, fear, or disagreement. I imagine debates over strategy. Should they explore further inland, risking exposure, or remain hidden along the coast? Should they leave markers for future Templars, or risk losing their secrets to curiosity? These were not trivial decisions. Every choice could mean life or death, success or failure, secrecy or revelation. Yet, even amidst conflict, the Templars demonstrated resilience. Their training, discipline, and shared purpose held them together. They were united not just by faith, but by loyalty to each other and to the mission entrusted to them. The bonds forged during perilous crossings and harsh conditions became unbreakable. They were a brotherhood, bound by more than oaths. They were bound by the knowledge that they carried the weight of history on their shoulders. I also think about the tension between secrecy and discovery. The Templars were driven to explore and record the New World, but they could not leave evidence that would be easily found. Every symbol, every artifact, every note had to be subtle, hidden, and interpretable only by someone trained in their code. They were walking a delicate line, making history while simultaneously hiding it. That tension must have been exhausting, yet exhilarating. And then there is the broader threat of being discovered by other European explorers. Even as the Templars quietly explored the New World, ships from Spain or Portugal could have appeared on the horizon at any moment. Encountering strangers might mean questions they could not answer or dangers they could not predict. In a sense, the Templars were racing against history itself, moving ahead of others, yet avoiding notice. Every decision was strategic, every movement cautious. The persecution from Europe and the unknown threats of this new land created a high-stakes environment. Survival was not just about food, water, and shelter. It was about protecting knowledge, safeguarding secrets, and navigating a world that could not be predicted. The Templars had to rely on skill, intelligence, and intuition to survive. And they did, using the same discipline that had allowed them to cross an ocean that few dared to imagine. I like to think about how they might have marked dangerous areas, using symbols to warn future explorers or fellow Templars. Hidden in forests, along cliffs, or near rivers, these subtle warnings ensured safety while maintaining secrecy. These markings were a reflection of the constant threat. They were both practical and symbolic, a reminder that every step forward carried risk. At the same time, they had to maintain morale. Fear, isolation, and uncertainty can easily break even the strongest group. The Templars would have relied on rituals, faith, and leadership to keep spirits intact. Daily routines, small ceremonies, and careful planning provided structure in an otherwise chaotic and unpredictable environment. These routines were not trivial. They were vital to survival, cohesion, and the success of their mission. Conflict was also about knowledge. Every observation, map, and manuscript was valuable, but also vulnerable. Losing any part of their accumulated wisdom could mean the end of the Templar presence in the New World. I imagine careful discussions about where to hide artifacts, how to record information, and how to communicate across time using symbols. They were architects of a secret history, leaving trails that might last centuries but remain hidden from the world. Even the land itself was a challenge. The Templars had to navigate rivers, dense forests, and unknown terrain while maintaining secrecy. Storms and natural hazards tested them daily. Every step inland carried risk, and every discovery required judgment. Was it safe to explore further, or should they retreat and protect the secret? The balance between ambition and caution was delicate, and the Templars were acutely aware of it. I also like to imagine the personal courage involved. Each man had faced persecution, betrayal, and unimaginable danger in Europe. Crossing the ocean and exploring a new land compounded these challenges. Yet, they pressed on, driven by purpose, faith, and the understanding that their mission was greater than themselves. This courage, quiet but unwavering, defined their journey as much as skill or strategy. By the end of this stage of their mission, The Templars had not only survived but thrived under pressure. They had adapted to the new land, left hidden symbols, and protected the knowledge they carried. Conflict and persecution followed them even here, shaping every action and every decision. And in doing so, they created a story that would remain hidden for centuries. A story of courage, secrecy, and extraordinary human determination. The journey across the unknown ocean was complete, the land explored cautiously, and the symbols hidden. Yet the struggle against persecution, both in memory and in practice, defined every step. The Templars were pioneers, not only in geography but in strategy, secrecy, and survival. Their legacy was written in whispers, symbols, and subtle traces, an invisible story of defiance against a world that sought to erase them. And as we follow these hidden paths today, we begin to see the extraordinary lengths to which these men went to protect their mission. The Templars' story is not just about discovery. It is about the courage to defy expectations, the intelligence to survive under threat, and the wisdom to leave messages that would outlast them. This is the heart of their conflict, the essence of their persecution, and the reason their journey continues to fascinate centuries later. After weeks and months of cautious exploration, the Templars began leaving behind traces of their presence. Subtle, carefully concealed, yet enduring. These were not monuments or buildings meant to be admired. They were small, precise, and hidden, secrets buried in stone, waiting for centuries to be noticed by someone patient enough to see them. I like to imagine them moving through forests, along rivers, or atop hills, examining the land for places that offered both safety and significance. A large boulder might serve as a canvas, a flat stone as a map, or a cave wall as a repository for symbols. Every surface had potential. Every mark could communicate directions, warnings, or knowledge to a future Templar, or perhaps to no one at all. These were not casual carvings. They were deliberate acts of history-making, encoded with meaning. Some of the carvings are geometric, precise, and almost impossible to ignore once you know what to look for. Crosses, circles, lines, and dots arranged in patterns that suggest purpose rather than decoration. Scholars have come across these in remote parts of North and South America, often dismissing them as native art or natural formations. But when viewed alongside Templar knowledge and European symbols, the parallels are striking. Precision, repetition, and placement hint at intelligence and intent. I find it fascinating to think about how these carvings were made. Tools from Europe, carefully preserved, were likely employed. Chisels, hammers, and other implements. The Templars would have worked quietly, avoiding drawing attention, even in areas without human presence. Every strike of the chisel, every etched line, was a record of their journey and an act of survival. These stones became silent witnesses to their crossing and their presence in a world that officially did not know them. Some carvings seem to align with the stars. If you study certain boulders at specific times of the year, shadows and sunlight fall across the etchings in meaningful ways. Could these have served as calendars, navigation tools, or markers for future reference? Possibly all three. The Templars were meticulous observers. They combined mathematics, geometry, and astronomy in their symbols, elements of European knowledge transplanted into a new, wild world. There are also smaller, almost imperceptible marks. Tiny scratches on rocks, subtle indentations in cliff faces, and arrangements of stones on the ground that are visible only if you know what to look for. These marks could indicate safe routes, freshwater sources, or hidden caches. They were practical, but also coded, ensuring that only those trained in their meaning could interpret them. To outsiders, they would appear trivial, meaningless, or natural. To the Templars, they were invaluable. Caves offered another opportunity. In secluded caverns, the Templars could hide more delicate items, manuscripts, relics, or tools. These were protected from the elements and from prying eyes. Some caves even show evidence of temporary camps, with small hearths and stone arrangements suggesting careful planning. The Templars were always aware of the importance of discretion. Even as they explored, they took measures to ensure that their secrets could survive long after they left. I like to imagine their methods of marking direction and distance. A carved arrow pointing toward a river, a series of dots indicating a trail, or a combination of symbols representing a specific location. It was a sophisticated system, hidden yet meaningful, functional yet discreet. These symbols were the backbone of their navigation on land, just as the stars guided them at sea. The Templars transformed the landscape into a coded map, one that only they could read. Artifacts left in stone or hidden in caves also tell a story. Small metal crosses, engraved tools, or even fragments of parchment could have been preserved. These items were not meant for display. They were markers of knowledge, survival, and intention. Each one carried the weight of secrecy, a silent message across time. And though centuries of weathering and human activity might have hidden or destroyed many of these, traces still remain in remote areas, puzzling archaeologists and historians. I began studying reports of unusual carvings in regions like Newfoundland, Brazil, and the Appalachian Mountains. Some feature geometric patterns strikingly similar to Templar symbols found in Europe. Others include arrangements that suggest careful planning and alignment. While mainstream historians often dismiss them as coincidence, the consistency and distribution hint at something more deliberate. Perhaps these are the very remnants of a hidden journey, a story of exploration and secrecy waiting to be pieced together. The placement of these symbols also seems strategic. Rocks near rivers or streams, caves along trails, and elevated positions with wide views of the surrounding land. The Templars were aware of natural geography and leveraged it to communicate. These markers weren't random. They were positioned to provide guidance, safety, and information to anyone trained in their code. In essence, the land itself became their message board, etched with secrets that survived centuries. Even small arrangements of stones carry meaning. Lines of pebbles, stacked rocks, or unusual formations could indicate hidden caches, direction, or distances. To the untrained eye, they appear incidental, but combined with other markers, a pattern emerges. The Templars were masters of subtlety. They knew that obvious structures would attract attention, but tiny deliberate signs could endure unnoticed for generations. I also think about the psychological aspect of these markings. Carving into stone is laborious, precise, and permanent. The act itself is an assertion of presence, a claim of knowledge, and a quiet defiance against the erasure they faced in Europe. Every mark is an echo of human ambition, courage, and secrecy, a message to the future that says, "We were here. We survived. We saw what the world did not yet know." Some of these stones may have even served ceremonial purposes. Crosses carved in hidden locations, circles etched in clearings, or patterns aligned with celestial events. These symbols were not only functional, they were spiritual. They connected the Templars to their faith, their mission, and the universe itself. Even in a new land, far from Europe, the Templars remained grounded in the principles and practices that had defined them for centuries. As I trace these stones today, I feel the weight of history pressing down. Each mark, each carved line, each arrangement is a message across time. They remind me that history is not only written in books but in landscapes, in objects, and in the careful acts of those determined to leave a record. The Templars' legacy may be hidden, but it is enduring, resilient, and waiting to be understood. The secrets buried in stone are more than just markers. They are evidence of a forbidden journey, a testament to courage, intelligence, and secrecy. They provide a bridge between Europe and the Americas, a silent narrative of exploration that defied the rules of the known world. And though centuries have passed, these symbols continue to whisper the story of men who dared to challenge history itself. By leaving these markers, the Templars ensured that their journey, their mission, and their knowledge would not be lost entirely. Even if their names were erased from records, even if their story was suppressed, the stones spoke for them. They told of courage, strategy, and the determination to explore the unknown while protecting secrets that could alter the understanding of the world. And as we uncover these secrets today, we begin to realize the enormity of what they accomplished. The Templars were not merely travelers, they were explorers, strategists, and keepers of knowledge. Their stones are silent witnesses, preserving a narrative that history almost forgot. They remind us that even in secrecy, courage can endure, and even in the shadows, extraordinary stories can survive. While hidden symbols and carvings in stone offer tantalizing clues, the Templars may have left evidence that is even more subtle. Objects, artifacts, and anomalies that quietly hint at their presence. Unlike the carvings, which can be observed with careful attention, this evidence is often overlooked, dismissed, or misinterpreted. Yet when viewed through the lens of the Templars' journey, these items may tell a story that history has largely ignored. I like to imagine a small European artifact, carefully hidden in the soil of the New World, perhaps a metal tool, a fragment of a manuscript, or a religious medallion. At first glance, it seems out of place, impossible even. But when you consider the Templars' ocean crossing and inland exploration, these objects take on new significance. They become markers of presence, evidence of a mission that defied the known rules of history. Some artifacts suggest knowledge far beyond what might be expected from a group of medieval explorers. Instruments for navigation, unusual metals, and objects with European craftsmanship appear in areas far from early settlements. Historians have debated their origins, often attributing them to lost travelers or later explorers. But the Templars' presence offers a plausible explanation. An explanation that accounts for the sophistication, precision, and distribution of these items. Even seemingly ordinary items can reveal extraordinary stories. A carved stone, a small metal object, or a piece of ceramic could have been used as a marker, a tool, or a protective charm. In some cases, these objects are aligned with hidden symbols, reinforcing their purpose. The Templars were careful, leaving evidence that could survive centuries without revealing their true mission. Their intelligence ensured that even the smallest artifacts carried meaning, often invisible to anyone untrained in their methods. I also consider manuscripts that may have been left behind. Fragile, secret, and often destroyed by time or environment, these written records could have contained maps, instructions, or encoded knowledge. Even partial fragments might explain the placement of symbols, the choice of landmarks, or the reasoning behind specific explorations. These documents may have survived in private collections, hidden archives, or even as subtle references embedded in local folklore. The alignment of certain sites is particularly intriguing. Rocks, hills, and rivers appear arranged or chosen with extraordinary precision. Modern researchers often dismiss these alignments as coincidence, but when combined with Templar knowledge of geometry and astronomy, the patterns are difficult to ignore. Could these be markers designed to guide travelers, record distances, or signal important locations? The possibility is compelling, especially when placed in the broader context of the Templars' mission and intelligence. Even biological evidence may carry hints of Templar presence. Reports of European plants or animals in regions long before known colonization suggest deliberate transport or cultivation. Seeds, herbs, or livestock may have been brought intentionally, serving practical purposes or acting as markers. While controversial, these anomalies invite the possibility that the Templars engaged in subtle, deliberate actions to shape or interact with the land they explored. I also reflect on oral histories and legends from indigenous communities. Stories of pale-skinned strangers arriving long before official European contact often appear in remote regions. While some may be mythologized, patterns emerge across vast distances, from North America to South America. These accounts, when cross-referenced with hidden symbols and artifacts, suggest encounters that history has ignored or dismissed. The Templars may have been careful to remain unobtrusive, yet their presence was sometimes witnessed and remembered in local memory. Small architectural anomalies also raise questions. Certain structures, ruins, or stone arrangements in remote areas bear construction techniques unfamiliar to native populations at the time, yet consistent with European methods. Scholars often struggle to explain them. Could they be remnants of Templar shelters, temporary forts, or ceremonial sites? Perhaps. These structures, while subtle, reinforce the notion that the Templars were active in shaping their environment, leaving evidence hidden but enduring. Coins, jewelry, or metal objects are another form of unseen evidence. Occasionally, archaeologists have unearthed European-style items far ahead of documented colonization. While many explanations exist, lost shipments, shipwrecks, later settlers, the possibility of Templar involvement cannot be dismissed outright. Their oceanic crossing and inland exploration make it plausible that such items were left intentionally as markers, personal belongings, or symbolic messages. I also ponder the possibility of encoded messages embedded in natural formations. Rocks, river paths, and mountain ridges could have been used as natural maps, their shapes altered or chosen to indicate direction, distance, or significance. To modern eyes, these may seem coincidental, but the Templars' mathematical and geometric knowledge would have allowed them to manipulate or interpret landscapes with precision. The land itself could have been a living record of their journey. Even today, some of these objects appear in museum collections without explanation. A fragment of metal, a curious tool, or a small religious item is catalogued as anomaly or unknown origin. Yet when viewed with an understanding of the Templars' journey, their secrecy, and their skill, these items suddenly take on a narrative. They are silent witnesses, proof of an expedition that the historical record ignores. I also consider the psychological aspect of leaving evidence. The Templars were meticulous and deliberate. Every object, every symbol, every arrangement carried dual purposes: practical guidance and historical preservation. They were aware that history could erase them, that persecution could destroy their records. By leaving subtle evidence, they ensured that the story of their journey could survive, even if only glimpsed centuries later. What is remarkable is the cohesion of this evidence. Artifacts, hidden symbols, anomalies, and oral histories form a network, scattered across vast regions yet interconnected by logic, placement, and design. Alone, each piece may seem inconsequential. But taken together, they suggest an organized, intentional presence, one that aligns with the known methods, discipline, and intelligence of the Templars. I often wonder about the intent behind this unseen evidence. Was it meant to guide future Templars? To protect sacred knowledge? To communicate with a distant world? Or was it simply a record of survival, a statement of human ingenuity in the face of adversity? Perhaps it was all of these. The genius of the Templars lies in their ability to merge practicality, secrecy, and symbolism into every aspect of their exploration. As I examine these fragments of history, I feel the weight of their mission. The ocean crossed, the land explored, and the symbols carved, yet there was still more to accomplish. The Templars were not only explorers, they were guardians, strategists, and visionaries. Their unseen evidence ensures that even centuries later, the story of their courage, intelligence, and determination is not completely lost. The unseen evidence is, in many ways, the most powerful. While hidden symbols can be overlooked, artifacts and anomalies endure in the physical world, ready to challenge assumptions, spark curiosity, and inspire investigation. They remind us that history is not just written in books, it is etched in stone, buried in soil, and preserved in objects that defy explanation. And as we uncover these pieces today, we begin to see the extraordinary reality of the Templars' journey. They crossed oceans, survived persecution, and explored unknown lands. They left symbols, objects, and traces that survive invisibly alongside natural and human history. These remnants form a mosaic, hinting at a story far richer and more complex than the records of famous explorers ever reveal. The Templars' journey, though hidden, is still with us. Each artifact, each carving, each anomaly is a whisper from the past, a secret preserved across centuries. Together, they tell the story of men who defied history, challenged the unknown, and left a legacy that waits quietly to be understood. The Templars' journey across the Atlantic and into unknown lands was more than an adventure. It was a mission to protect knowledge. Knowledge that, if revealed, could have changed the course of history. Even today, the full extent of what they carried is shrouded in mystery. Manuscripts, maps, sacred relics, and coded instructions were all part of their treasure, not of gold, but of wisdom. And much of it remains lost, hidden in ways we may never fully uncover. I like to imagine their libraries aboard ship. Small, carefully packed collections of manuscripts, charts, and religious texts, secured against storms, theft, and the passage of time. Every scroll, every parchment, was precious. Losing one could have meant the loss of centuries of accumulated knowledge, as well as the secrets of the order itself. This was not a casual journey. It was a mission to preserve information that could be dangerous, misunderstood, or suppressed if it fell into the wrong hands. Some of these manuscripts likely contained coded instructions, symbols, geometric diagrams, and cryptic annotations that only the initiated could decipher. To us, centuries later, these codes may appear indecipherable or nonsensical. But for the Templars, they were practical tools. Maps of the ocean, directions across the land, locations of hidden symbols, or even instructions on ritual or sacred practice. It's fascinating to consider the level of sophistication required to create and interpret such codes in the 13th or 14th century. I also think about their sacred relics. Objects of religious or mystical significance, carefully protected, and possibly transported across the Atlantic. These items were not just symbolic, they carried authority, legitimacy, and the spiritual weight of the order. In an unfamiliar land, these relics may have been hidden, preserved in caves, under stones, or inside natural formations. The very act of protecting them was a form of resistance against history itself, ensuring that the knowledge and faith of the order survived persecution and time. There are hints in historical records that the Templars carried maps that contradicted conventional European knowledge. Detailed charts of coastlines, rivers, and land formations far ahead of known explorers suggest that some of their knowledge was deliberately hidden or lost. These maps may have guided them across unknown oceans, allowing them to navigate with precision in a world without modern tools. If such maps exist, they represent a treasure trove of lost knowledge, waiting to be rediscovered. I also consider the possibility of scientific knowledge. The Templars were not only warriors and clerics, they were also educated men, trained in mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and engineering. Some of the hidden symbols and alignments we see may have been a practical application of this knowledge, marking astronomical events, measuring distances, or encoding information in ways that modern scholars are only beginning to understand. This is knowledge that could have reshaped our understanding of history, science, and exploration. Even oral traditions suggest that the Templars knew more than we realize. Legends of advanced construction techniques, mysterious artifacts, and strangers from the sea hint at knowledge transferred across oceans, unseen by the broader world. These stories, scattered across continents, are fragments of a larger narrative, a narrative carefully hidden, yet persistent across centuries. The idea of lost knowledge also extends to their interactions with indigenous peoples. Some theories suggest that the Templars shared certain techniques, symbols, or understandings in subtle ways, influencing local knowledge without revealing their origins. This would have allowed them to communicate, survive, and interact without exposing themselves. The result is a subtle imprint of European understanding on the Americas long before conventional colonization. I like to think about how they documented discoveries in hidden ways. Small notebooks, etched stones, or coded symbols may have recorded observations of the land, plants, animals, or astronomical events. These records could have been intended for future Templars, preserving practical knowledge in case the mission was interrupted. Every mark, every notation, was both a record and a safeguard, a bridge between generations. Some scholars speculate that the Templars may have even had knowledge of resources unknown to Europeans at the time. Minerals, fertile land, or strategic locations. If they did, they would have carefully documented it, marking locations with subtle symbols and hiding them in ways that only someone trained in their methods could recognize. This could explain why some areas were avoided or overlooked by later explorers, despite their apparent accessibility. I also consider the spiritual dimension. Many Templar symbols combine practicality with faith. Geometric patterns, carvings, and alignments often carry dual purposes, functional and symbolic. They may indicate water sources or safe routes, while also serving as markers of sacred spaces, ritual observance, or philosophical instruction. The Templars viewed knowledge as holistic, combining the physical, spiritual, and intellectual. Even today, the mystery persists. Artifacts in museums, ancient carvings, and unexplained alignments continue to puzzle researchers. Some of these may be remnants of Templar knowledge, carefully preserved but largely overlooked. The challenge is that much of it was designed to be invisible, to survive in fragments, and to communicate only to those who could understand it. This makes uncovering the full scope of their knowledge an ongoing, elusive quest. I imagine the Templars themselves, sitting in secret, recording observations, creating codes, and protecting relics. Every act was deliberate. Every decision was guided by the understanding that history might erase them. They were acutely aware of the fragility of knowledge and the permanence of stone, metal, and coded records. Their foresight allowed them to leave a legacy that could endure beyond the lifespan of any individual. Lost knowledge also implies responsibility. The Templars were guardians, not just explorers. They were entrusted with information that could have had profound consequences if misused or revealed prematurely. This is why secrecy was paramount. Every symbol, every artifact, every hidden manuscript was a safeguard, a way to control access to knowledge across time. They were not reckless adventurers. They were careful custodians of the world's hidden truths. And yet, much of this knowledge is still missing. Fires, natural decay, and human interference have erased countless records. What survives are fragments, symbols in stone, artifacts in soil, and stories whispered through generations. These remnants challenge us to piece together a history that was almost deliberately obscured, to understand a journey that defied the rules of the known world, and to recognize the extraordinary foresight of those who undertook it. The mysteries of lost knowledge remind us that history is never complete. What we read in books is only a fraction of what occurred. Hidden behind persecution, secrecy, and the passage of time lies a deeper story, a story of courage, intelligence, and vision. The Templars were not merely crossing oceans. They were preserving wisdom, mapping the unknown, and leaving a trail that survives invisibly, patiently waiting to be understood. Their mission was extraordinary. They combined exploration, survival, and secrecy, ensuring that the knowledge they carried could endure beyond centuries of persecution. Even today, scholars, archaeologists, and enthusiasts continue to uncover hints of their presence. Each discovery, however small, adds a piece to the puzzle, revealing a network of knowledge that has survived against the odds. And as we study these mysteries, we begin to appreciate the audacity and brilliance of the Templars. They defied persecution, crossed unknown oceans, and left behind a silent archive of wisdom. Each symbol, artifact, or hidden record represents not only survival but an understanding of the world far ahead of their time. Their lost knowledge is a testament to human ingenuity, foresight, and courage. The journey of the Templars is far from over. Even centuries later, as we uncover fragments, decipher symbols, and interpret artifacts, the story continues to unfold. Lost knowledge challenges our assumptions, expands our imagination, and invites us to consider that history is richer, stranger, and more complex than we have been taught. The Templars crossed oceans, explored unknown lands, survived persecution, and protected secrets. Yet their true legacy is the knowledge they preserved. Hidden, subtle, and enduring, it remains one of history's greatest mysteries. And as we follow the trail of symbols, artifacts, and whispers, we are reminded that some stories are never truly lost. They are waiting, silently, to be discovered. As the centuries passed, most of the Templars' journey remained hidden, lost to time, persecution, and the vast unknown. Yet, despite deliberate secrecy, there are signs that refuse to be ignored. They stand silently in forests, mountains, riversides, and ancient ruins. Unlike subtle symbols or hidden artifacts, these signs are bold enough to provoke curiosity, invite investigation, and challenge conventional history. I like to start with the carvings that are impossible to dismiss. Some rocks and cliff faces contain geometric patterns, crosses, and symbols remarkably consistent with European Templar designs. These are not natural formations. They are deliberate, precise, and carefully placed. In some remote locations, these carvings align with landmarks, rivers, or paths, suggesting that they were designed for navigation as well as record-keeping. Their distribution across distant regions is striking, hinting at a network of exploration rather than isolated wanderers. Another undeniable sign is architectural anomalies. Ruins in remote regions show construction techniques unknown to native populations at the time but consistent with European methods. Stonework, arches, and layouts demonstrate advanced understanding of geometry and engineering. Scholars often struggle to explain these structures. Could they be evidence of Templar shelters, temporary bases, or ceremonial sites? The patterns suggest deliberate intent rather than coincidence, and the possibility of Templar involvement is compelling. Even in natural formations, patterns emerge that cannot easily be explained. Rivers and mountain ridges sometimes appear aligned with symbolic markers, suggesting the use of the environment as a living map. This reflects the Templars' known expertise in navigation, astronomy, and geometry. By reading the land itself, they could leave instructions and signs that were invisible to the untrained eye but meaningful to those who knew their methods. It's as if the earth became a canvas for their journey. Artifacts also provide undeniable clues. Metal objects, religious medallions, and tools of European origin have been found far from any documented settlements. While skeptics attribute these to lost travelers or shipwrecks, the pattern and placement of these items suggest intentionality. Some appear near carvings, in caves, or along hidden paths, reinforcing the idea that the Templars were creating a system of hidden markers across the land. These objects are more than relics. They are evidence of presence, strategy, and foresight. I also find oral histories fascinating. Across the Americas, indigenous communities have stories of pale-skinned strangers arriving long before Columbus, sometimes teaching, sometimes observing, always mysterious. While these tales may be mythologized over centuries, the consistency of certain details, appearance, attire, symbols, suggests a kernel of truth. When combined with artifacts and carvings, these oral histories become more than folklore. They hint at an extraordinary interaction between the Templars and the New World. Some signs are astronomical. Certain carvings, stone arrangements, or alignments correspond with solar or lunar events. Shadow and light interact with these markers in ways that are meaningful only at specific times of the year. The Templars' understanding of astronomy and mathematics likely allowed them to encode calendars, directions, or sacred observances into these sites. Modern observers may initially dismiss these as coincidence, yet the precision and consistency across distant locations are difficult to ignore. There are also anomalies in flora and fauna that hint at European influence. Certain plants, seeds, or trees appear in regions long before documented colonization. Could the Templars have transported these intentionally, either as markers, food sources, or medicinal resources? It's plausible. The presence of non-native species in specific, strategic locations adds another layer to the evidence, suggesting deliberate planning rather than random chance. In some regions, stone arrangements create paths or guideposts that align with hidden symbols. Small cairns, stacked stones, or arranged boulders can indicate direction, safe routes, or significant sites. To a casual observer, these may seem random. But to someone trained in Templar methods, they are practical, subtle, and highly informative. These paths show that the Templars were not merely surviving, they were systematically exploring, mapping, and documenting the land. Even European-style artifacts appear in unusual patterns. Coins, tools, and medallions found far from known settlements are sometimes positioned to correspond with carvings or natural markers. This suggests they were intentionally placed, either as messages, caches, or markers for future travelers. The strategic placement of these items reflects the Templars' meticulous planning and attention to detail. Nothing was accidental. I also consider caves and hidden shelters. Many remote caves contain evidence of temporary occupation. Hearths, stone arrangements, and subtle symbols. These were practical for survival, but also strategic. They allowed the Templars to hide relics, manuscripts, and tools safely while maintaining access to essential resources. The consistency of cave locations and markings across vast areas is difficult to explain without considering deliberate exploration by highly organized groups. Oral accounts, archaeological finds, and hidden symbols intersect in fascinating ways. Sites with carvings often coincide with unusual artifacts and alignments. Indigenous stories sometimes correspond to these locations, hinting at encounters that defy conventional timelines. When taken together, these signs create a mosaic that cannot easily be dismissed. They suggest a deliberate, intelligent, and highly secretive presence, the hallmarks of the Templars. The psychological aspect is also striking. The Templars were not leaving signs for recognition, they were leaving them for survival, guidance, and secrecy. The purpose was practical, yet it ensured that future generations could uncover traces of their journey. This foresight reflects extraordinary intelligence and discipline, demonstrating that even in exile and persecution, they were planning for continuity across centuries. Even today, explorers and researchers continue to find new sites that defy explanation. Unusual carvings, European-style artifacts, and architectural anomalies appear in unexpected locations. While skeptics propose random coincidence, lost travelers, or natural formation, the overall pattern points to an organized and purposeful effort. These signs, spread across vast distances, challenge the accepted narrative of exploration and discovery in the New World. In conclusion, the signs left by the Templars cannot be ignored. They exist in stone, soil, artifacts, and memory. They are subtle but consistent, practical yet symbolic. Together, they form a network of evidence that challenges what we think we know about history. The Templars were explorers, scholars, and custodians of knowledge, leaving trails that endure quietly across centuries. These signs invite us to reconsider the story of the Americas. The narrative of discovery is incomplete without acknowledging the possibility of earlier, secretive exploration. The Templars, with their discipline, intelligence, and determination, may have been the first to navigate, document, and leave their mark on this land. And even if history has largely ignored them, the evidence persists, whispering across time and waiting for those willing to see it. The journey is far from fully understood. Every new artifact, carving, or oral account adds a piece to the puzzle, revealing a story of courage, secrecy, and extraordinary human ambition. The Templars' mission was dangerous, hidden, and remarkable, and the signs they left behind continue to fascinate, challenge, and inspire us centuries later. After centuries of secrecy, exploration, and survival, the Templars left behind a network of clues, symbols, artifacts, and whispers across the land. Yet even with all this evidence, the greatest mystery remains. What was the ultimate purpose of their journey? Why risk everything, faith, life, and freedom, to cross the Atlantic and explore a world few Europeans had ever imagined? This is the question that continues to fascinate historians, archaeologists, and explorers today. I like to imagine the final stages of their journey. The Templars had crossed oceans, survived persecution, and mapped unknown lands. They had hidden symbols in stone, concealed artifacts, and recorded knowledge in coded manuscripts. But beyond survival and exploration, there must have been a deeper mission, a purpose that transcended immediate discovery. Perhaps it was spiritual, perhaps strategic, or perhaps both. Whatever it was, it remained carefully hidden, even from the eyes of the world. Some theories suggest the Templars were seeking sacred relics, lost knowledge, or even connections to ancient civilizations. Others propose they were testing the limits of navigation, geography, and survival. Whatever the case, the evidence points to extraordinary foresight. They were not merely explorers or fugitives, they were visionaries, carrying secrets and understanding that the rest of Europe could not yet comprehend. I often wonder about the hidden maps and manuscripts they may have left behind. Some of these could contain knowledge so revolutionary for the time that it was safer to conceal it. Perhaps they documented resources, astronomical events, or advanced engineering techniques. Perhaps they recorded interactions with indigenous peoples or discovered lands far beyond what we now know. The very act of hiding these records shows that they were aware of the power and danger of knowledge. Artifacts scattered across the Americas hint at their intention. Religious relics, metal tools, and inscriptions suggest more than random survival. They suggest purpose, planning, and careful documentation. Every item, even the smallest, was part of a system designed to preserve knowledge, guide others, and withstand centuries of secrecy. In this sense, the greatest mystery is not whether the Templars were there. They were, but what exactly they accomplished and what they intended to leave behind. Hidden symbols carved into stone and natural formations further deepen the mystery. Alignments with celestial events, mathematical patterns, and precise geometric arrangements suggest that the Templars were thinking on multiple levels: practical, spiritual, and intellectual. They may have been encoding a knowledge system meant to survive across centuries, waiting for someone who could understand it. The question is, what was the end goal of this hidden knowledge? I also consider the human element. The Templars were men of faith, strategy, and courage. They understood that their actions would be judged harshly, even erased from history. Yet they pressed on, leaving subtle evidence, hiding relics, and recording knowledge. Their greatest mystery may be intertwined with their understanding of legacy, the desire to preserve their order, their wisdom, and their faith in a world determined to erase them. Some researchers propose that the Templars were searching for something tangible: a lost city, sacred treasure, or ancient library. Others suggest that their mission was symbolic, a spiritual quest that transcended material gain. Both theories have merit. The artifacts, symbols, and hidden messages suggest they valued both physical and intellectual discovery. They sought to map the world, understand it, and leave a record, all while preserving secrecy and survival. The strategic placement of symbols, carvings, and artifacts also raises questions about communication across time. Were the Templars sending messages to future explorers, to themselves, or to other secret societies? Perhaps they intended to guide those who were worthy, leaving breadcrumbs across a vast landscape. The sheer complexity of this hidden network indicates extraordinary planning and intelligence, yet the ultimate purpose remains elusive. Even their interactions with indigenous peoples add to the mystery. Some oral histories suggest cooperation, observation, or subtle exchanges of knowledge. Did the Templars leave more than symbols and artifacts? Did they leave wisdom, traditions, or teachings hidden within local communities? If so, the legacy of their journey could extend far beyond physical traces, embedding itself quietly in human memory. I like to imagine the final moments of their exploration. They had survived storms, evaded discovery, and crossed continents. They had hidden relics, etched symbols, and encoded manuscripts. And yet, there was one final act, a last secret they preserved, perhaps the culmination of their mission. What could it have been? A sacred location? A hidden archive? A knowledge system so profound that it required centuries to fully uncover? The silence of history is deafening, yet the evidence persists in whispers. Some anomalies discovered in remote regions continue to defy explanation. Stone arrangements, lost manuscripts, and European-style artifacts appear where no one expects them. Even with modern technology, historians and archaeologists struggle to interpret these signs. The Templars may have intended it this way. By encoding knowledge, hiding relics, and leaving subtle clues, they ensured that only the diligent, curious, and perceptive would uncover their secrets. Their greatest mystery is not just what they did, but how deliberately they concealed it. I also consider the philosophical implications. The Templars were not just explorers, they were visionaries navigating a world in which knowledge was power, and secrecy was survival. Their journey challenges our assumptions about history, exploration, and human ingenuity. It reminds us that what is recorded in books is rarely the full story. Hidden in stone, soil, and subtle artifacts are narratives that defy conventional understanding. Artifacts, carvings, and symbols form a mosaic of intentionality. Each piece alone may appear insignificant, yet collectively they point to an intelligent, purposeful, and secretive presence. The greatest mystery is the coherence of these traces. They speak of planning, discipline, and a mission beyond immediate survival. The Templars were not random wanderers. They were architects of a hidden narrative, designed to endure and survive erasure. Even today, the mystery challenges us. Every discovery, however small, forces us to reconsider history, question accepted timelines, and imagine the possibilities of secret exploration. The Templars' journey may have been physically hidden, but its evidence survives in subtle, profound ways. The greatest mystery is not just the journey itself, but the depth, complexity, and intelligence embedded within it. In the end, the Templars left a legacy that is both tangible and elusive. Hidden symbols, artifacts, oral histories, and anomalies form a network that defies easy explanation. Their mission was not merely survival, it was preservation, secrecy, and the transmission of knowledge across centuries. And while we may never fully understand the scope of their purpose, the traces they left remind us that history is layered, complex, and often hidden just beneath the surface. The greatest mystery yet is the full measure of their ambition. What did they hope to achieve? What knowledge did they carry? And what secrets remain buried, waiting for the right eyes, the right minds, and the right time to uncover them? These questions linger, urging us to look closer, think deeper, and appreciate the extraordinary courage and foresight of the Templars. Even centuries later, their journey continues to captivate, challenge, and inspire. The hidden symbols, artifacts, and subtle traces are more than evidence. They are a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and vision. The Templars' story is unfinished, written in fragments, and waiting for those brave enough to seek the truth hidden in the shadows of history. After centuries of secrecy, hidden symbols, and whispered legends, the journey of the Templars in the New World reaches its quiet, enigmatic conclusion. While we may never know every detail of their mission, the traces they left behind tell a story of courage, intelligence, and unyielding determination. Their legacy is not written in gold or monuments, but in the subtle, enduring marks of human ambition and ingenuity. I like to imagine the final moments of their exploration. After months or years of careful movement, the Templars had mapped rivers, hidden symbols in stone, concealed artifacts, and encoded knowledge in manuscripts. They had interacted, even subtly, with the indigenous populations, leaving impressions that may still echo in local stories. Each action was deliberate, each mark meaningful, and each object a silent witness to a journey that history almost forgot. The legacy of the Templars is multifaceted. First, there is the tangible evidence, the carvings, artifacts, and hidden items that survive to this day. These are the most visible remnants of their presence, yet they remain subtle enough to have avoided full detection for centuries. Rocks etched with geometric patterns, metal tools of European origin, hidden caches in caves, each piece tells a story of precision, planning, and survival. They are artifacts of foresight, not random chance. Then there is the intangible legacy, the knowledge they carried, preserved, and concealed. Manuscripts, maps, and coded instructions were more than tools. They were safeguards of wisdom. Even if many were lost or destroyed, the very act of recording and protecting knowledge demonstrates an extraordinary understanding of history, strategy, and survival. The Templars were not merely explorers. They were custodians of human understanding, ensuring that their insights could endure beyond their own lifetimes. I also reflect on the symbolic legacy. The carvings, alignments, and subtle markers in the landscape represent more than navigation. They signify intention, planning, and belief. Some symbols encode practical instructions, others spiritual or philosophical truths. The Templars combined faith, mathematics, astronomy, and geometry in ways that were unprecedented. Their symbols were both practical and profound, designed to communicate across time, yet only to those capable of understanding their meaning. The interaction with the land itself is part of their legacy. By transforming natural formations into markers, aligning structures with celestial events, and arranging stones or boulders to convey direction, the Templars essentially created a living map. This map is invisible to those who do not know the code, yet enduring for those who do. It is a testament to human ingenuity, the ability to merge knowledge, skill, and foresight to leave an imprint that transcends time. Artifacts, too, continue to speak. European-style coins, tools, medallions, and fragments of manuscripts suggest deliberate placement. These items were not left behind casually, they were intentionally hidden to preserve the story of their journey. Even centuries later, when uncovered by archaeologists or explorers, they challenge accepted history, prompting questions about the scope and impact of the Templars' presence in the New World. I like to imagine the cumulative effect of these traces. When carvings, artifacts, oral histories, and architectural anomalies are considered together, they reveal a coherent narrative. The Templars were not random wanderers. They were strategic, disciplined, and visionary. Each piece of evidence supports the next, creating a web of intent and meaning. And yet, the full picture remains elusive, inviting curiosity, research, and imagination. The greatest aspect of their legacy, however, may be the mystery itself. By deliberately hiding their purpose, protecting knowledge, and creating subtle markers, the Templars ensured that their story would endure in fragments, challenging future generations to seek understanding. This was a form of intellectual immortality, a way to outlast persecution, erasure, and the passage of time. The mystery they left behind is not a flaw, but a testament to their foresight and sophistication. Even the whispers in oral traditions and local legends are part of this legacy. Stories of pale-skinned strangers, mysterious symbols, or hidden treasures may be mythologized, yet they carry kernels of truth. They preserve memory in the human consciousness, a way of transmitting fragments of history that written records could not. The Templars' legacy is thus both physical and cultural, tangible and intangible, enduring and evolving. I also consider the broader implications. If the Templars reached the New World centuries before Columbus, and if they left behind maps, knowledge and markers, it challenges conventional history. Their journey was hidden, yes, but it may have influenced exploration, knowledge, and understanding in ways we cannot fully measure. Even if their ultimate goal remains unknown, the act of exploration, survival, and preservation itself is extraordinary. The Templars' story teaches us about resilience. They faced persecution, displacement, and enormous danger. Yet they persisted, using intelligence, strategy, and discipline to navigate unknown lands. Their ability to survive, explore, and protect knowledge in a hostile environment reflects courage and determination of the highest order. Every carving, artifact, and manuscript is evidence of human ingenuity triumphing over adversity. I like to imagine modern explorers following their traces. Scholars, historians, and enthusiasts continue to uncover carvings, artifacts, and anomalies that defy explanation. Each discovery is a piece of a puzzle centuries in the making, revealing a story of courage, secrecy, and extraordinary foresight. The Templars' journey remains relevant, reminding us that history is not always as straightforward as it appears, and that some of the most remarkable achievements remain hidden in plain sight. Their legacy also invites reflection on the nature of history itself. What is remembered, what is lost, and what is deliberately hidden shapes our understanding of the past. The Templars remind us that knowledge is power, and that secrecy can be a tool of preservation. By encoding their journey in subtle, enduring ways, they ensured that their story could survive even when erased from official records. This is a profound lesson for all of us, that even in obscurity, human endeavor can endure. Ultimately, the Templars' secrets remain partially hidden, but their impact is undeniable. They crossed oceans, explored unknown lands, and left behind traces that challenge conventional understanding. They encoded knowledge, protected relics, and created symbols that speak across centuries. Their legacy is a combination of tangible evidence, intellectual foresight, and enduring mystery, a story of human courage and ingenuity that continues to captivate us today. And as we study these traces, we begin to appreciate the extraordinary achievement of their journey. The carvings, artifacts, manuscripts, and subtle markers are more than relics. They are a record of human perseverance, intelligence, and vision. The Templars may have been hidden, but their legacy endures, quietly influencing history, inspiring curiosity, and reminding us that some stories are never fully lost. The greatest revelation of all is this: the Templars' journey was not only about exploration. It was about survival, knowledge, and legacy. Every stone carved, every artifact hidden, every symbol encoded, was part of a deliberate effort to ensure that their mission would be remembered, even if only in fragments. Their story is a testament to the power of human determination, the intelligence of strategy, and the enduring nature of curiosity. And so the legacy and secrets of the Templars are revealed not in full, but in part, a mosaic of evidence, whispers, and subtle signs that continue to challenge, fascinate, and inspire. Their journey across the unknown, their courage in the face of persecution, and their determination to preserve knowledge stand as one of the most remarkable, mysterious, and enduring stories in human history. Even now, as we follow their traces, we realize that some mysteries are meant to be discovered slowly, piece by piece. The Templars' legacy is alive, not in gold or grandeur, but in the subtle, enduring marks of a story that refuses to be forgotten. And perhaps that is their greatest secret of all, that true knowledge, courage, and foresight can survive the passage of centuries, waiting quietly for those brave enough to seek it.